Hopefully everybody is still with me. We now have 27 attendees, and I again welcome you to the a webinar on the pharma tech vertical. And this is a really interesting time if you guys because of the coronavirus. Many of us all of us are now pretty much working from home. It just tells you, it just gives you an idea of how fragile our human endeavor is, right? That some virus that just flared up in some Wuhan province in China, thousands of kilometers from where I am and thousands of kilometers where you are, has now caused this pandemic, which is a terrible word, which means a catastrophe on the global scale and is threatening lives of people all around the world, right? They said the only place where they don't have a virus right now is in Antarctica, and no guarantee that it won't be there. As this so happens, pharmaceutical industry will play a tremendous role in solving this problem and getting us through it and getting us to the point where we will be living normal lives. Things will recover and we will be all better for it, and we will either get vaccinated or they'll figure out some way to get us safer or safer. So that just basically kind of gives you an idea of what exactly are we dealing with. A global pharmaceutical market is $1 trillion market, right? $1 trillion of sales of pharmaceutical technology, of drugs, of different things, all related to people's health, right? Related to fighting diseases, related to different ways of making a human life better, right? And again, for I'm assuming that the companies that are in the forefront of fighting the virus will actually be financially, we're very well rewarded because we're in the marketplace, right? Where the drugs and everything else that our pharmaceutical industry produces costs a lot of money. There were projections to grow to $1.1 trillion in 2021. Maybe it will be even bigger. And and as such, we realize that with a market like this, a company like Avenga has a really a rich target to offer services, and being able to be a valuable partner or vendor or partner vendor or whatever other combinations with the different companies in the space, right? And so when we talk about pharma, right, it's a huge conglomerate of different things, and it's a multinational industry, right? So there are top 10 farmers are basically are omnipresent. They're in every country, right? Sell either directly or through a subsidiary, or we're working the stuff. And they are in the process of manufacturing, right? The end result of anything that these pharmaceutical companies do is something that they will deliver to the patient, right? It could be medication, it could be a device, right? A blood pressure machine stuff, or a different version, a different thing, or it could be an artificial hip or an artificial knee or some other things. It could be a fairly complex treatment, right? So in the biotechnical world of biotechs, We now have DNA-based treatments where rare diseases and cancers, with information about the specific DNA of a patient, where the blood is drawn from the patient, or sometimes in large quantities, and a specific treatment is manufactured to specifically treat that particular patient. So clearly, a lot of different things that are happening, but end result of everything is there is something that is produced, right? Um, by the way, guys, I think the chat is open. So if you're having a hard time hearing me, or if there's anything going on, please feel free to let me know, or if somehow this stuff is moving. We also we've I believe we shared these handouts. So clearly, if you have some questions, we'll have time for Q&A a little bit later in the presentation. But if you have questions, or if you need clarification, please feel free to raise your hand or something, and we will, I'll stop the presentation and I will, answer the question if necessary. So the next step is to look at the pharma, is to literally look at specifically when it comes to drugs or medicine, is really look at the three major phases uh, of the clinic of the pharmaceutical endeavor, if you will. It's preclinical, or known as drug discovery. Then there's something called drug commercialization, and then obviously the drug manufacturing. So preclinical is very simple, right? It's a process of identifying a molecule, right? Which is they work at that level in chemical, that will, in reacting with the human body, will produce some positive results, those from a particular molecule that is found in the general science, in the general discovery, all the way to the final commercialization, or actually getting drugs to the patients who need them, can take 10 years, or may never happen, right? Or something like that. So in the preclinical phase, they identify the molecule. If the molecule is of an interest, they will then create what we call a clinical trial, right? The clinical trial is exactly what it is. Let's try this out and see if it works. And it could be a clinical trial for it could be a clinical trial for very small group of people, what they call phase one clinical trial, which also the term you will hear now in the news, that there is a vaccine for coronavirus that entered phase one clinical trials. Phase one clinical trials are usually defined by healthy adults that have volunteered to take this treatment, or to take this drug in various doses, to look at the efficacy of that drug, whether it makes them feel better, worse, or has no effect on them. Generally speaking, they're healthy, they are very and they will go through this process of identifying, of identifying the value of that particular stuff. Then there is a second part of clinical trials, which is usually what we call the phase 1B clinical trials, which is generally focused on very sick people, right? And they usually are experimental trials. So if there are patients with cancer that are in the end stage of their cancer disease, they volunteer for experimental drug treatments so that they will prolong their life, or contribute to the society by helping others, in terms of developing treatment. From that, it goes to the phase two clinical trials, which is phase two and phase three clinical trials have a very scientific approach. Patients are recruited based on a protocol that is developed by the the scientists working together with the regulatory body. They may identify the number of people, they may identify the number of women and men, or whether women, let's say, could be pregnant or non-pregnant, whether, almost never are children involved in clinical trials except for this experimental stuff, because children are just not considered ethically to be, because they cannot consent, they cannot agree to be a part of the clinical trials. And those people, what we call, will be de-identified, right? So the groups will be divided into two equal categories. Some will get the actual drug, and the other ones will get a sugar pill, right? Or like if it's for example, a shot, maybe they'll get a shot of saline water, right? Something that is absolutely harmless. And because otherwise they won't be able to tell whether or not a particular if the person took the drug and got better, and the person who didn't take the drug got better, well, then that this is not a this is, there's some other reasons, right? And they will recruit between 400 to 1,000 people, because they need what we know as a statistically significant results, right? Which means that if they have too small of a sample, or there's not enough men and women, or there's not enough people from European Caucasian, and maybe people from Africa or different places, then the governing body may declare this particular trial ineffective, or all of it will go to nothing. So they recruit a lot more people than necessary. If the minimum requirement is 400 people, they may recruit up to 600 people, because people drop off, people die, unfortunately, or something, so they need enough people in the clinical trial to go from beginning to the end, so that they can submit information to the governing bodies to be approved. From phase 2, which is smaller, they can go to a phase 3, which is a much bigger clinical trials, and so on and so forth, and then moving down the line. Um, you know, I can spend a whole day talking about clinical trials and phases of clinical trials, but at this point, it's pretty much what do we need to know. In Avenga, we work with companies who have been involved in clinical trials. So, and continue, whether it's directly like our customer Roche, where we work on technology that allows us to capture information with regard to clinical trials, track the what they call subjects, which is really patients, people who are participating in the trials, all the way through the process of publishing the trials. And we also work with several other companies, which I will describe, which, as part of their business model, are do drug. They do clinical trials on behalf of other companies. So, if Pfizer, for example, wants to do a clinical trial, the Pfizer may decide not to do it themselves, but to engage a company like ours to perform the clinical trial. And those companies called CROs, or clinical research organization, but in essence, they are an outsourcer, right? They have the expertise. They do not have the depth of knowledge in terms of the actual, doctors or PhDs. They have people who know how to work with in the term we'll hear is investigators. Investigators are doctors. Doctors are the ones who can only work with patients. We're not, nobody else is allowed to work with patients, and that's a rule all over the world. So as these companies engage in the practice of working with the company that is sponsoring the drug, right? And that's therefore the company is called the sponsor. They will go through different aspects of either engaged from the point of view of a recruit, of finding the investigators, doctors, to have those, helping those find the actual participants, what they call patient recruitment, the recording of information all the way through what we call closing out the trial or locking it down. And once it's locked down, then the data can be presented. All through that process, there are a lot of technology that is being used. In the industry, when I started for Value, which joined Avenga in 2006, it was a wild west in that area. There was a lot of new technology being proposed, and frankly, it took 14 years for this to become a norm. Now there is no paper-based clinical trials. 14 years ago, most of clinical trials were literally done on the pieces of paper, which was doctor's notes. Information was captured, then it was sent in for key punching or key entering, which is and once it was entered, then it was verified. So we've gone a long way from the just the basic process of capturing information to becoming a very astute and hardworking in terms of identifying the data, identifying normalities, abnormalities, all kinds of different things. And the industry uses a lot of the statistics and analytical programming that is necessary. And this is where there's a lot of opportunities. There are companies that do heavy investment in SaaS. They do other things, and so on and so forth. Also, it's worth just mentioning that a lot of new thinking is now turning into pharma, into the clinical trials, and you'll hear a term, or sometimes you'll hear a term called adaptive clinical trials. I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but basically, while observing the trial during the process, they have flexibility to make changes, to enhance the process, or maybe even to model using AI to model the results, right? Different organizations have different standards and look at this thing from a different perspective. Some are much more, some receptive to this, and I'm pretty sure that the stuff we're doing with coronavirus is going to be very adaptive, right? Because the need of the many outweighs the risk to the few, which also brings us to another very interesting area where Avenga has a strong influence, or participates working with our customers, is a term called pharmacovigilance, or also the simpler term, drug safety. Drug safety focuses on following the drug after it's been released. And it kind of is a parallel to something we call drug commercialization. Drug commercialization, and this is for those who've been working with Ivenga for a while and heard about the project, which is at the heart of what it does in terms of drug commercialization. Commercialization just means taking this particular now approved drug and making it known to the people, which is healthcare providers, who will then prescribe it to the patients, right? Or bringing it to the pharmacies, or getting information out there. Different countries have different rules, so drug commercialization is a very important aspect of the life cycle of the drug, because if we create the drug but nobody is prescribing the drug, or the drug is not known to the people who need to solve the problem, it generally becomes useless, right? And of course, as we got through the commercialization, they will start drug manufacturing. And again, it's a very complex process. There are in-house manufacturing, there is third-party manufacturing. One of the things we hear from people, and they say, "Oh my God, in order to manufacture the drug, there is some component that has to come from India or from China," and now say, oh, but what happens if there is a epidemic in China and the factory is closed and they're not producing the component that I need for that drug? That means that the drug can be, there will be a shortage of the drug, and and they're not able to deliver. Most of the manufacturing usually is done in the countries where these drugs are located. There are some exclusions for generic drugs and drugs that are produced kind of now, what we call over the counter, which means they can be sold without the doctor's prescription. But generally speaking, United States, the drugs are produced in like Puerto Rico and some. New Jersey used to be a really big place for drug manufacturing. We're at like 5:25. So I just want to kind of make sure that we have captured that information. And then really, as I talked about, the difference between the pharmaceutical companies and pharma tech companies is that pharma tech companies are really just focused on the technology or the outsourcing of different functions. And and they need help, and because they need help in software development, they need CRM, they need ERP, they need data management, right? So as we help our prospects and customers, we want to focus on the areas where they need help. This could be related to the actual staffing or related to the key initiatives. And so as we align our offerings, we will focus in this area. The industry is generally known as risk averse, right? The exception being maybe some biotech companies. Risk averse is risk aversion is key because again, they're playing with not playing, maybe the wrong term. They are impacting human life, right? They're impacting people, so they want to make things sure that things are done, in the very safe and repeatable manner. And I'll talk a little bit about compliance in the next slide. And so generally that leads to the technical absorption being 3 to 5 years behind the bleeding edge, right? So just now, for example, Salesforce is a major technology that is heavily rolled out in the pharma, right? 5 years ago, right, when you talk to them about Salesforce, which was heavily used in different areas, they would say, "Oh my God, no, we don't use the cloud. We are on premises. We control our destiny. We do all this type of stuff." So in this case, we are, the technology is getting through to them, and in this kind of stuff, digital transformation, consolidation, making sure that the information is shared and used. All of those things are key aspects of the pharma and pharma tech using data. So let me. Okay, so the next one. So when we talk about pharma, we talked about sub-industries, right? And I talked about drug manufacturers, biotechnology and R&D, and drug marketing companies, right? We talked, a lot about it, and this is just a kind of explanation of this. Biotech companies are, outsource everything except their science. So it's always, if we can get, and there could be very small, like 3 to 5 people, literally, to the huge biotech companies like Genentech, right, which is probably about 15,000 employees, right, and several drugs. Generally, what's happening is big pharma does not really do a lot of basic research. They outsource that to R&D or to universities. So MIT or University of Maryland or some other universities will do basic research, and then pharma will purchase the patent and then use that patent to build the drugs and stuff. And one of the things that when we talked about pharma, we always talk about a very highly regulated industry, right? The only industry that I think is just as much regulated as pharma is probably airplane manufacturing. And then we know with Boeing what happens when you don't follow certain regulatory objectives during manufacturing process, right? You could impact lives, and those of you who've seen what happens with the 737 Max know what's going on. So pharma industry basically focuses on these key elements, and these key elements is also what we should be focused on when we are presenting to the pharma industry, when we talk to them about our capabilities, right? That we are, that we have the compliancy packages in place, which means that we have standard operating procedures, that we understand that our employees or technology people, whether they're developers, QA, project managers, or business analysts, have to go through level of training. So and all of that has to be recorded as a record. So if somebody's working on the project, they have to go through training. They have to sign a document that says, yes, I've gone through this stuff. For our colleagues in Poland who work on Roche, right? They have to go through a series of trainings and be qualified as an engineers. Also, along with the training, there's also things like CVs, and other information that is collected. And the big dreadful word in the industry is the word is called audit, right? So every so often the customer, I mean the sponsor, will audit its suppliers or vendors, and Avenga being one of the vendors will definitely undergo a level of audit, right? And these things happen, and we need to be prepared for them. We need to have all the documentation necessary to be able to pass the audit. Of course, our customers, our vendor, that we work with, often give us a lot of guidance to that, right? So you have to be really open-minded, and you have to say, look, I understand that I am, we're working in this industry. We are focused on compliance. We're focused, and we will work with you on being part of that process. So things, safety, right? We talked about that, drug safety, quality, right? Which is something that we probably have very little impact to. But if you look at the actual word quality, you also find out that they qualify, or they look at the quality of documentation, right? If is the user story written very well? By the way, a lot of pharma is still waterfall, but many of them now have like gone to agile methodology. So some of them will have requirement documents, and then they'll have cross-reference those with the test plans and things like that. So they look at quality of that. Quantity, that just part of the ERP process, right? Where do we ship, and how do we ship, and what do we ship, and things. Market flow, right? As my German colleagues here are on the call, we just recently had a pre-qualification call, if you will, with the buyer, which is a German pharmaceutical company. They're big. All of them are big consumers of the market information, right? What's being prescribed, where it's being prescribed, by whom, what is the competition doing, what what is their products doing in the market, because then they can then affect their marketing efforts and their outreach efforts to the people, which is healthcare professionals, who will then influence the consumer, the people who will do the drugs. Of course, we talked about R&D from the perspective, and then pricing and patents, right? The pricing is really it's more of a, stuff we do kind of on the healthcare side, where things we do end up, in reimbursement, cost, and things like that. And of course, patents are things that are specifically that control intellectual property, that allow these. So some of these drugs, right, have exclusivity. Patent provides exclusivity. Patent clock. Different countries have different clock. In the United States, I believe it's now 7 years. In Europe, it could be a little bit longer, 7 to 10 years. But basically, they have exclusivity. After that, this information is public, and somebody else can then use the same chemistry to produce a what now known as generic drugs. So if you look at things like aspirin or something like that, right, there is no patent anymore. The patent has long expired, and many manufacturers can produce aspirin or ibuprofen or other things that are stuff. And but obviously, some very modern drugs, the drugs that just came on the market, have patents. Viagra just came off patent 2 years ago. So, so these are the key things to know. And the pharma world, you want to be familiarized with lingo, right? If you're coming to see, if you have a meeting, or in this case a phone call, with a prospect, understand what are their concerns, right? How many of these items that we have listed here would be major drivers for their decision making process, right? Whether they're looking at market data, whether they're looking to improve their quality of the process, and other things. And of course, accordingly, we can offer them solutions that will solve that problem. Okay. So we talked generally, as I said, the money is in the pharma, right? The pharma guys, the Roches, the Pfizers, the Mercks, the buyers of the world, right? They're the billions and billions of dollars. They spend the billions of dollars, and they make billions of dollars. But there is a group of companies that have identified themselves as a pharma tech companies. And my definition, this is Igor's definition of pharma tech companies, the pharma is the companies that focus on technology or outsource or augment the pharma's business process, right? So, and of course, the typical example that we always use is the largest pharma tech company in the world, which is also happens to be a customer of ours, and we're very excited and happy and continue to work with them, running several projects, and they have everything. So they'll go to a company like Roche or Pfizer or whoever and say, guys, you have commercialization. We have a commercialization solution. You need a clinical trial. You need to do a trial on a particular promising drug. We can pull together a clinical trial. You want to help in identifying market information. We have market information. So these guys, basically, their pitch to the pharma is, guys, you focus on either the R&D or manufacturing, and let us focus on technology. Let us also focus on skills individuals and skills people, because again, this is a people's business, right? And that's basically, those are the things that those guys tend to sell. There are companies that we call CROs, clinical research organizations, that only do clinical work. And of course, there are others that do a wide variety of stuff. There are companies that do farm drug safety. There are companies that do other things. So in the industry, the pharma companies that engage pharma tech companies are known as sponsors, right? We are not. I would be safe to say that Avenga is not considered a pharma tech company, right? We are a technology company or a PDO, product development outsourcer, but we are not because one of the things we don't want to do is we do not want to be seen as a competitor to our customers. We want to be a complementary to them, right? We can work for sponsors, but like in the general area where we do with Roche or GSK is where we provide we provide talent in the staffing or managed services business. because PharmaTech companies generally don't do managed services unless it's a cloud-based solution around their particular product. Like ERP, SAP does a lot of work in pharma. So hopefully this kind of describes the PharmaTech. And again, so what can we offer to PharmaTech as opposed to pharma? To PharmaTech is first and foremost, they're always looking for people, right? Because these they staff projects, they win projects, they compete against one another, and they need people. And of course, our Avenga IT professionals in Poland is really instrumental in providing the right people for Roche and JSK that fills that gap. The other thing they need is technology or technology solutions. So this is kind of solution architect on down. Generally speaking, they may be engaging in the new tech or the tech that is just being kind of divided. So in the case of, they've had a Salesforce for many years, but they really didn't have the PDO experience, and they wanted a company like us, Avenga, to provide them with the technological excellence and build the solution around their tech, right? Or a combined tech between us and between them and us. The other thing is that especially if you go to smaller companies, they want process. So we work with several smaller companies that are pharmatech companies, and they basically will come to us and say, "Guys, give us your coding standards, give us your SDLC, right, software development lifecycle process." Because we are focused on what we do best, which is really run clinical trials. And in those cases, it's very important that we communicate to them the maturity of the processes that we have, whether it's agile or in other cases, or how we integrate quality assurance, how do we integrate different components and make sure that we deliver the key items. And as we venture into these new tax unknowns, they sometimes look to us for vision. In the case, in many times they are being thrown at, oh, you guys should have data science, you guys should have AI, you guys should have automated this, or some other things, right? And rather than building that expertise in house, they'll go out there on the marketplace and they'll say, okay, let's hire Avenga. Avenga has the vision of how to use data science to drill down and get some results, either about market data or about clinical participation or some of the components that we have here. So those are the things, right? And those are the things that we can offer. And of course, as in vision component, we will eventually move into more of a consultative engagement with them, where we could bring in people and say, look, we can do a seminar for you, we can do a workshop, we can identify the things that you guys can use and then give that value. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of what the pharma tech companies are looking for and what is their availability. And this is the slide I also used in our Cologne meeting. But given the fact that 3/4 of the people have not seen it or haven't been it, what Avenga, we call Avenga a value add service provider, right? So, we are not pure staffing. We are not pharma tech. We are service provider with the value add component. And that value add component allows us to be in a discussion, right, at some very high level, right? We can say, look, We come to you. You do not have to, yes, you can hire XYZ, right? But then you have to educate them. We have a general domain knowledge. We have a basic compliance in place. The word basic is maybe a wrong word. It should be said we have compliance in place, right? Basic meaning that we for the companies that are just engaging vendor for the first time, or kind of really haven't had this information, we're able to provide them physical security, internet security, data governance, all other aspects and components of compliance, which is in line of what I've told you about the values that these guys hold dear, which is regulatory, right? Compliance is all part of regulatory process. And of course, we have use cases and success stories, and we have a number of internal champions and people who are willing to go out there and give us references and say that we have successfully been able to deliver a significant value to these guys, right? That kind of, just to kind of remind you, our customer base, we have two large pharma clients already, and we value them greatly. Our friends in Avenga, Poland, service them quite well. We have two large PharmaTech customers, which is by far the number one in globally. And we have in the past worked with others, but at the moment we are just these two. And then we also have several mid-sized customers, Q Pharma, Instem, and Arithmus. Arithmus is the Italian CRO. And by the way, I'm quite concerned because all of those guys are based in northern Italy, and I've been in touch with the CEO of Arithmus. Wojtek, Yuri, and I visited him in Verona just about a year ago, right? And so my heart goes out to them, and hoping that they will, live through this. Instem is based in UK. This is one of the companies that has a significant phase one technology. And of course, our friends in Q Pharma are basically antithesis of. They provide a low cost, and fairly low tech solutions, complementary to high tech solutions that are provided by. So they have a CRM, but it's their own light version of the CRM. It does not require Salesforce. It's custom built. They also do a lot of custom development for particular trials and different things. So that's those are our customers. And again, what also makes Avenga is unique in many ways is the fact that we are recognized product development outsourcer, right? Products is a new thing, right? Kind of like apps, right, if you will. So nowadays, clients don't really want to talk about internal systems. They want to talk about apps that they deploy to their customers, right? You can have this app or this app. So is a commercialization app, while something else is a more of a different app. So all these different things allow us to be seen as something different and something to differentiate from others. I published these different lists last time, so please feel free to go through. Just to give you some names, biotech, top CROs. But this is for our for my German colleagues. I went through and I found that there are clinical research organizations in Germany, which is Germany specific, and it would be interesting to see if we have a way to, get introduced into these companies, find out what their needs are, and whether or not we can, we can muster some capabilities that will meet their requirements. So I think it's valuable to see. But also, let's not forget that medical devices are also a big part of the of pharma, right? And medical devices are devices that are used within the body, but also devices that are used outside the body. There is a lot of work that's being done in the imaging, high speed the imaging of either MRIs or the CAT scans and PET scans and all the other stuff, and other things. The information is captured, the information is cross-referenced, and it's also heavily used in clinical trials. And as I mentioned during the sales training, I'm part of our Pharma SME, subject matter expertise group. And my focus, besides working my network to bring us new leads and opportunities, is to help you guys out. I think we had a great collaborative effort with our German colleagues in Berlin as we presented the first opportunity to buyer. Whether we win it or not, it's the fact that we were able to put together this information and drive it through the process. We can work through, and also given the fact that a lot of these type of businesses require partners, sometimes local partners, so we can assist in recruiting those partners by talking to them about specifics and things. And of course, training similar to the training that we're doing today. Hopefully, if we see more opportunities and you guys come back to me with some targets, we can train more specific. We can train on more specific items related to a fairly narrow aspect of